Right. Hey, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to Cloud Talk Live. Folks, this is episode 100. I'll call that out a little bit more later. My name is Jeff DeVerter, Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. And love for you to introduce yourselves as per norm over in those comments down below. We see them on the side of our screen. We'd love to know who you are and where you are. Now, normally we're here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30. It's neither Tuesday nor Thursday. And definitely not 8:30. This is a special one, folks. We're here to talk to you about how to better protect yourselves and your companies during this time of, increased threat exposure in the cyberspace. Now, what you're probably also already realizing is the fact that my internet is unstable today, very unstable. You'll see me freeze. I may disappear, but hang out. We'll all be here. All of my guests have great internet, so they'll keep the conversation going. Hey, if you want to get a hold of us here, feel free to send an email at solve@rackspace.com. Hey, we have a friend from San Antonio in already. Glad that you are here. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, folks, this is episode 100 of this. I'm so excited to be able to have been here to triple digits. And thank you guys for sticking with us. The audio for all of these, of course, are available on the podcast, the Cloud Talk podcast. You can also reach out to us at rackspace.com/solve/100. That's right, episode 100. You haven't pulled me off the air yet. And since, hey, we got Clark Kent here. I hope you're good, busy saving the world. We have a friend from Houston as well. And Ashley's here. Oh my gosh, everybody's showing up. This is fantastic. Guys, this is great information. I'm going to give you a bit of a news article here in a second, but if you have people in your organization in charge of cyber or you're interested in learning more and know friends that are, send this out to them. I'd love for you to give a link out. This is important information and would love for all of you to be able to get that out. All right, let's move on. With this, we'll move on to This Week in Cloud. I really just have one news article for you, and that is an article out of ZDNet, and that's how the Russia invasion of Ukraine is affecting your cybersecurity. Folks, we are living in this time of heightened threat exposure. We're going to, in just a little bit, hey, thank you, Susan, for being here. In just a little bit, I've got 3 security experts who are going to help unpack what the CISA organization here in the U.S., part of Homeland Security, has put out around how to better protect yourself. Well, if you go over to rackspace.com/solve/100, remember, nobody's selling to you there except free information. No pop-ups, no nothing. You can find the links to the bios for my guests. You can also find the link to these articles as well. So I hope you will go and check that out. All right. So with that, let's move on in. And just a reminder, all of this stuff does show up in the podcast feed. Go subscribe to that. If you are, an amazing one came out last Friday, former Racker around corporate philanthropy and how Rackspace effectively adopted a neighborhood in San Antonio, the Magnificent 7 schools. It's really a great story, and I hope that you will go and check that out. All right. Well, enough of me rambling. I want to introduce our guests here today. I have 3 amazing guests who have come to be a part of it. Now, Karen O'Reilly Smith, no stranger to the program. In fact, she was just on last Thursday, but she's come today as Rackspace's CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, to help unpack what's happening on the security side. A new guest, somebody who's their company's been on, but she hasn't. Patty Wright is here. Patty is the SVP and GM of Consulting Services over at the cyber firm known as Bishop Fox. And then Chris Hughes, who joined us last fall during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, CISO and co-founder of IKEA. And each of these great individuals will have a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more. So Daniel, let's bring these guests up. There they all come. So Patty and Chris and Karen, welcome to the program. I'm so glad that each of you are here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
You bet. Now, guys, we pulled this together in relatively short order. If you knew some of the wranglings that happened for us scheduling this stuff, we have about a month's worth of content and individuals scheduled and getting prepared to come be a part of this. We threw this together last week based on demand of a question I asked on LinkedIn. And it really did seem like a lot of folks really wanted us to help unpack this shields up kind of warning from the U.S. government. Hey, thank you guys for all of the great encouragement for this 100th episode, by the way. And I thought, we were the four of us were chatting before. We have all of this warning from the government around how to prepare for cyber, but let's just ask the question: and what are we seeing right now? Are we seeing anything? Karen, we'll start with you. You've got visibility into rack space and a bunch of customers. So, are we actively seeing anything here today?
Jeff, at this point, we're not seeing an uptick in any, alerts for us. I've talked to peers in the industry, and we're not seeing it yet. But it's always just one of those things you want to be aware of, and you want to be cautious. You want to put some extra focus on it right now.
That's right. That's right. Chris, are you seeing anything out and about?
I mean, we can joke about this behind the scenes a little bit here, but we haven't anything attributable directly quite yet. But there have been some pretty big incidents with Samsung and NVIDIA the past couple of weeks. Obviously attribution can take time, but nothing quite yet.
Okay, this is all good. Patty, I've got to ask you and what the folks at Bishop Fox are seeing.
Yeah, and so as with Karen and Chris, not seeing anything necessarily directly, but what we are seeing, since Bishop Fox is basically a consulting company that is working for a lot of clients that are looking to ensure that they are secure, we're getting an awful lot of requests from customers that have some dealings with either global companies that touch on Ukraine, et cetera, and they are really trying to get ahead of things and ensure that they've got partners out there to help them in a crisis.
Got it. Okay. Well, we are seeing some comments here in the threads that they think some folks are seeing some things. So I was also telling the group here before we started, I love the fact that we're having this conversation before a lot of us are actively seeing things. It's this heightened threat exposure. I live out here in the country, and we haven't had rain in this part of the world for a good long while. So we're in a bit of a drought, and there's a sign right along the road, and it says, burn ban is in effect. It's in effect because the conditions are ripe for big fires. Well, folks, the conditions are ripe for bad things to happen on the cyber world. And so that's really what, of course, led the CISA.gov site, the folks over at Homeland, to come out with their guidance. And what we want to do today is step through that guidance. This is great guidance, whether you are an individual, whether you work in a small company, whether you work in a Fortune 5 company. This is all stuff that, by the way, doesn't necessarily just need to be done, when bad stuff is going on in the world. This is good everyday type stuff. Now, they break it down into 4 primary areas, and we're going to unpack each of these through our time today. But it starts with encouraging companies of every size to reduce the likelihood of damaging cyber intrusion. How do we better lock the door, prepare our environments? And maybe, Chris, I'll start over with you. As we look at some of these things that are on this list, how can companies best prepare to keep the bad guys out?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on this and hinted at this a little bit, but it comes down to doing the fundamentals. A lot of these things that are recommended by CISA are fundamental things that we've seen be critical security controls from SANS and others, throughout the years. Things like MFA, things such as logging for following up on intrusions or incidents as they happen, and then kind of preparing the organization to respond when, not if, but when something does happen. Whether top exercises, getting your incident response plan in place, having key individuals identified, and then obviously testing that resilience through testing backups and things like that. So these are very fundamental things that organizations, have been advised to do for a long time. But these are interesting times, and there's some new concerns. So it's definitely kind of reiterating that.
All right, my internet blinked there for a second, but in that first list also. It calls out that they have a list. There's an active list. Folks, go out to the site and check it out. But known exploited vulnerabilities identified by the CISA organization, as well as strong CISA controls and guidance, as well as some free hygiene services. Do you guys have any experience with those? I love the fact that there's just a list. Go look at the list and see if any of those conditions match your environment. Patty, what are you guys thinking about some of that stuff?
Yeah, so I was looking at that this morning, and the list is now 479 known vulnerabilities that they're identifying. They just added 95 more, I think, on March the 3rd. These are vulnerabilities that have been out there for a long time. And so kind of to Chris's point, right, we need to do all of the kind of due diligence that has been sort of recommended over the years, right? All the patching and running antivirus, right? Using multi-factor authentication. The one other thing that I am seeing as a piece of advice that we've been offering for a long time, but is one of those pieces of advice that doesn't often get taken as we go and look at people's architecture, and that is segmenting your network. It's critical because the majority of how the sort of this new these new issues are hitting us is through ransomware. And if people are taking the time to segment their network, they can mitigate how far that compromise can go across their network. So just on top of some of the items Chris mentioned, I would really recommend people do what they can to segment their network if they could.
Yeah, limiting that blast radius when someone can get through is so valuable. I was talking to a friend of mine who owns a very successful regional sized business. So it's a good sized business, but regional to the US here. And the owner had done a lot to move to a lot of SaaS-based offerings for the ways that the business operated. But there was one thing that ran internal, and that one thing actually did get compromised. But the blast radius was very, very much contained. It was huge for that organization. Karen, that gets challenging as the organizations get larger, doesn't it?
It sure does, because you're not only worried about internal, but a lot of us have customers we worry about too. One of the other things you can do that Chris and Patty, to add on to what Chris and Patty said, is, this is basic cyber hygiene. These are things we talk about as CISOs for the last several years. I mean, this is what we do, good hygiene. The other thing is maybe security awareness. Get your security awareness out there, maybe ramp it up. Some companies will do it when people first started a company, and then they'll do it once a year. I think it's nice to reiterate that throughout the year. And even maybe now is a good time to go out there and talk about clicking. That is how we get a lot of our ransomwares, our adversaries into a company, is they're clicking on phishing emails. So one way is maybe reinforce that, go back out and educate our staff and our customers about ransomware and about clicking and about looking at, emails that they get from the external, and really paying attention to those that they don't recognize and don't click.
Well, one of the features, we use Office 365 around these parts, and when those emails come in, when I look at the preview, the first thing that shows up is either, here's a little bit of text from that racker, we call ourselves rackers at Rackspace, had said in there, or if it's from external, it literally says, caution, this came from external. And you read those with a little extra scrutiny. It's definitely not a time to go looking for a Russian bride and click on those emails, I'm thinking. And so I think that's really a good call out as well, Karen, what you brought up around, it's not just about protecting your own employees and your company, but it's how that stuff, when you don't segment, when you don't limit the blast radius, the fact that it really can become very impactful to the rest of the world. I think about, and this is Ukraine, from when did NotPetya come out? That was a couple of years ago now, but that was a Russia attack, cyber attack into Ukraine, and that one literally caused, well, I guess you can measure it in billions now of dollars of impact the world over. All right, so those are ways to help keep the bad guys out. Guys, it's the blocking and tackling. It's the basic stuff. Patch your stuff. Don't have old operating systems laying around. Have an accurate inventory of what's there and be aware of what's happening. There's a great story. Maybe we can post a link to it. I think I put it in the chat earlier, Daniel, if you can pull up that New York Times article. But hats off to what Microsoft did in the early days of this around their ability to go out and work with the U.S. government on the stuff that they were seeing. As you can imagine, a company like that, seeing all cloud-based infrastructure, seeing all the Microsoft 365 stuff, gives them a window of visibility. And they saw ransomware, they saw new malware coming out, and were actually able to help not just the U.S. government, but several other European governments as well to be able to look for that stuff, which was really pretty cool. All right. So one of the ways, the next section in the Shields Up directive and guidance is all around taking. First, it starts with reducing the likelihood of damaging cyber intrusion, but then taking steps to be able to detect it. So how do you, ways to help make sure that if the bad guy gets in, that you can figure out that they're in, so Chris, maybe over to you. Let's talk about ways to detect the bad guys.
Yeah, definitely. And they give some very solid fundamentals there and when it comes to logging and utilizing antivirus, anti-malware to block malicious signatures. As Patty mentioned, that list from, I think it was 95 to 400, identified vulnerabilities right now. And that's kind of indicative of the state of the ecosystem. Is like, you're never going to always be ahead of this. Like there's all, if you block something, they're going to find another avenue in. And on the microsegmentation concept, I think it really ties nicely to where we're seeing the industry go with zero trust too. Look at how we're moving towards zero trust network architectures, for example. And then moving beyond MFA, for example, you have additional access controls in place, whether it's where the device is coming from, device security posture, the time of day, the user identity and things of that nature. But on the detection front, it really comes down to doing those fundamental things: the antivirus, anti-malware, having logging, and not just having logging, having people actually look at the logging, conducting things like threat hunting, for example, going out there and actively looking for something on the network that may be there, and you may just have not realized it quite yet. I think that can go a long way for organizations, just getting understanding of what's in their environment and how can they respond when they do identify something.
Yeah. So Patty, over to you. What are you guys seeing and recommending there?
Yeah, and I would second everything that Chris said. I would just say, just adding to that, just literally the last little piece, which is, they don't really believe that right at this moment there's a credible threat that they're saying to the US, but they are saying for companies that are dealing with Ukrainian companies or have a global presence, you should be adding to the monitoring that Chris is saying. Basically, just take extra care there, right? To be inspecting that traffic if it looks like it's coming from there. And obviously have a plan, which would be in the next step, right, of what do you do when you have something to respond to. But I would say really monitoring the traffic closely at this time in history, just to make sure that if there's something either from a Russian or Ukrainian perspective, because obviously you are you maybe just hit, as you said, in the scatter shot there.
Yeah. All right. I'm watching my internet blink all around. So Karen, I'm just going to throw it to you to talk about this for a second.
Yeah, and I agree with Patty and Chris. It's really watching that unusual. I mean, we all trend our traffic. We kind of know what's normal and what's kind of unusual for us. Really zero in. If there's any hint that this is unusual traffic, you're seeing sites pop in that you haven't seen before, kind of isolate that traffic. Isolate the traffic, spend a little time to investigate it. And like Chris said, the logging is so important. Get that logging, make sure it's turned on, make sure someone can go in and really, because that's the area you're going to go in and log, and that's the area you're going to go in and research if there's something that does occur. So definitely traffic inspection is important at this time, and anything that looks unusual, don't just go, oh, maybe it's just, no, go in and investigate it at this time.
And what a great time to also take our regular cadence of updating leadership, or if you're leadership, for waiting for the IT security team to come in and give the update. Oh, they always come in at the end of the month. You know what? Maybe we meet every Monday. Maybe we meet for 30 minutes every day. Are there any anomalies? That heightened sense of awareness. Nothing that we're talking about today, nothing that's recommended in this list is rocket science. It's all the basic stuff. I mean, literally, they have a bullet in here that says, if you're doing business with Ukraine, maybe inspect that traffic a little bit more. Seems very common sense, but that's what you find with all of this stuff, in my opinion, that's here. But the common sense, the basic ones, are the ones that tend to just go unheeded, unfortunately. All right. The third is, as we move in progression, how do we make sure they stay out? Second, what do we do? How we pay attention to see if they've gotten in? Third is ensuring that the organization is prepared to respond if an intrusion occurs. Now, Karen, you and I have talked about this on podcasts, on the live show, in articles, over coffee. But Rackspace has a pretty measured approach for how we do this, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say one thing is make sure your incident response team is in place. They're kept up to speed on what's going on, what you're looking for. So if there is an incident, you are prepared to respond. Make sure your key personnel in your SOC, your incident response team, make sure they're ready. They know what the playbooks look like. They know how to execute on an incident. And I would say lastly is just to maybe, if you've got the time, do some tabletop exercising. We've talked about that before, Jeff, how we do red team activities, tabletop exercises. Do a tabletop exercise in this case. I really think it would behoove the team to have that extra practice. Just again, it's just for potential, incident or attack.
That's right. So Patty, over to you. Thoughts about this section?
Yeah, no, I've got a lot of thoughts on this section. As I said to you in the early, when we were introducing ourselves, I've been in security for over 20 years and in a number of companies built their incident response functions. Realistically, everybody should be running some kind of an incident response tabletop exercise to see how they do. It's one thing to sit and have a bunch of playbooks. It's another thing to see them in action and know that everybody knows their role. Everybody knows how to contact who they need to contact. Oftentimes, your incident response procedures has alternative ways of communicating if your systems are breached or if there's any kind of risk whatsoever. So as Karen says, definitely sort of the red team, blue team, communications plan, executive, bring your board in if you're a company that's got a board that needs to know what they're doing. Obviously have a communications plan to both law enforcement and the media if you need it. So there's a lot of things. The one other thing, Jeff, that I would note that I don't see in any of CISA's recommendations, it's really talking about the regular maintenance you have to do. The other thing is, the regular testing that people perform. Obviously, at Bishop Fox, we perform pen testing for people, but rather than the annual pen testing that people are getting, there is continuous scanning and continuous testing they should be doing to continually uncover what kind of vulnerabilities they have. So it's one other thing that is not sort of listed in the regular maintenance things that they've recommended here.
Yeah. So Patty, that's awesome. And obviously this is an area where you guys really focus on as an organization. Should somebody want to engage with you to help them in this area, especially during this time, how would somebody do that? Other than
just literally contact Bishop Fox on our website. There's all kinds of contact information. Okay. We have not only the traditional services that are, application, network, and device pen testing, right, to see whether there's vulnerabilities in whatever it is you're using, but there is a service called Cosmos that is continuous testing. I think it's probably the new world of testing. It's no longer sufficient to test once annually for PCI or your own governance, etc. It's going to be necessary to continuously test simply because systems change so often, and you don't really even know where you're sitting. You don't know whether your infrastructure is on your own hardware or it's out in the cloud. So anyway, so enough of that. But yeah, just simply contact us through the website.
Awesome. Very good. Hey, Chris, anything to talk about when responding should an incident occur?
Yeah, kind of where they were going with that, and I just wanted to add on to it a bit. Like, I think it was Patty that made the comment about getting the board involved. We talked about, having incident response plans in place, testing and focusing on continuity. But, we all know that technology is a business enabler. And I think that we need to bring in the business leadership into this process so they can understand the criticality of these events should they occur. And then, not only that, but if something does occur, we want to know who in the business do we need to contact. There's legal folks, there's regulatory folks, there's obviously executives that may need to be notified and involved in this process. So I think that can go a long way. And then you're ultimately not just, planning for these things, but also, like they said, testing for these. You actually want to test for this stuff. And I love what Patty went with the continuous, testing because, I have 4 kids. I can check their room when I tell them to clean it. It might be clean in that moment. But if I wait a year and check again, it's probably going to be pretty dirty between that time, right? So, we need to be continuously testing these controls, continually testing our cybersecurity hygiene window of time because the adversaries definitely will be.
Okay, that was a perfect example for the state of a network, the state of a compute environment to the state of a child's bedroom. So great analogy. But Chris, let's move into that last section around being resilient when should a destructive cyber incident occur. How are you guys helping to coach companies through that?
Yeah, we're helping organizations lean into modern, whether it's practices or technologies to look at cloud and can you do a lot of things with cloud when it comes to business continuity and incident response, where you're talking about fault tolerance, geographic redundancy within your infrastructure, for example, having immutable infrastructures using things like containers and such like that, so you can replicate things at scale in a quick fashion, moving towards infrastructure as code, so you can quickly deploy your environments again if something does happen. Those are all methods from a technical perspective. Couple that with a practice and policy of type approach within your organization, and you can be really resilient from there. I also like to emphasize, lean into some of the guidance from organizations like NIST. I think it's NIST 800, either 160 or 161, that focuses on cyber survivability. And it talks about how to design systems and organizations, when it comes to cyber survivability. And that I would stress, go beyond your organization. We talk about supply chain security, for example. We have critical vendors and suppliers and partners within our ecosystem. They can be compromised, or they may be impacted in a way that impacts you, and you need to plan for that accordingly as well.
Yeah. So Patty, you really sort of alluded to this one in this section earlier on when you talked about network segmentation, because that is a way to help be resilient. But how are you guys approaching this? How have you seen it in the past with your 20 years of experience?
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned, it's also one of the hardest things to implement, right? Because it really takes a very, very careful architected plan to do it. And so we are seeing people move to it. We're especially seeing industries like healthcare, simply because they have got critical infrastructure that is, life dependency, and as a result, they are moving to segmentation to ensure that patient networks are segmented from their lab networks, from their whatever networks, right? And they are also a very heavily acquisitive industry where they acquire other clinics and other hospitals. And so each time that happens, it poses more risk. And to that point, I would say, in terms of our advice for those companies out there that are heavily acquisitive, they have to really, really be careful, because they can be as secure today as kind of what Chris alluded to, right? The once yearly, but they acquire a new company and now they've opened a brand new door. So if they attach them to their network, they really need to make sure that they do all of the exact same hygiene on that network as well, and possibly segment them off for a while. Back to our topic.
Patty, that's such great advice. I hadn't really even considered as much about, going through acquisitions and the impact that could have. But as you brought it up, I'm thought about conversations I've been drawn into, and I think about PE firms moving really quickly and putting companies together and really thinking about, what that overall bottom dollar value is. And the quicker they can make that happen, I've seen that go south so quickly. In the IT space, especially around the exposure that can get created. Hey, Chris, and all the work that you guys are doing, I forgot to have you mention, how can folks get a hold of you or IKEA to engage with you guys?
Yeah, definitely similar to Patty. Find us on our website, QUIA.us. I'm sorry, and also on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn, as well as my co-founders. We're very active on there all the time. You can also find me on a podcast called Resilient Cyber. A little plug there. But happy to help and speak to organizations of any shape and size. We work in the public and private sector and bring decades of experience to bear.
Yeah, go look for him on LinkedIn. That's how I found him the first time around. There's some great content there. So Karen, let's bring it back to you here as we're getting to the top of the hour. Any last thoughts on resilience and preparing for incidents?
I think you look at this one just like you would any other one, maybe with a little increased focus, because there could be something imminent. But I would say just practice good cyber hygiene, focus it, make it a real part of the security program and the maturity of the program.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this program here today. I hope, audience, that you found this useful. Share it with friends. It will be on the podcast audio stream here later this afternoon. This is available for replay on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn for as long as it stays alive there. So go reach out there. Again, nothing rocket science in what you find over on CISA.gov. /shields up, but a great reminder of the things you need to do. We're in an environment of heightened concern. It's just ripe for an issue. So let's do the work. It'll be less work than if you have to respond. So let's do the prep work now. Everyone, thank panelists, Karen, Patty, Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this today. And I look forward to having you back on in the future.
All right. And congratulations on 100.
Hey, thank you so much. We're excited about it. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. We're back tomorrow with, I got to push a button right here. If you can bring me full screen, we have Michelle Peterson as we continue to shine a light on women in tech. She is Chief of Staff to our CEO here at Rackspace. So I hope you'll tune in at 8:30 tomorrow for that episode. Have a great day.